Good morning. It's so great to see you all here at the Nashville Public Library, where books are only half the story. My name is Terry Hughes. I am the president of the Nashville Public Library Foundation, and it is our pleasure to sponsor the public lecture with Margaret Atwood. It's sort of hard to believe. We have to pinch ourselves a little bit that Margaret Atwood is really here with us. I want to let you know that we will have a book signing directly after this, and I'll give you some instructions at the end. The other bit of housekeeping I have for you is when it's Q&A time, we have standing mics on either side, and if you'll make your way to a mic to ask your question, Ms. Atwood will go back and forth. She will give equal time to each mic, so be ready for that. Well, it takes a lot of effort to put on a public lecture like this, and the staff of the Nashville Public Library has been tremendous in getting it organized and getting ready for you this morning, and I want to thank them. I also want to thank the Ingram Content Group. They have underwritten this entire public lecture, and that's very, very generous, and we are very, very thankful to them. Additionally, the Tennessean has been a fabulous media sponsor, media partner. I think you saw the wonderful article in the paper last Sunday, the interview with Ms. Atwood. Very, very wonderful. They've done ads. Partly, that's probably why many of you are here today. So we're very thankful to the Tennessean and also to our public relations partner, McNeely, Piggott & Fox, who've really helped us get the word out. So may I have one other clap for those guys? Since 2004, the Nashville Public Library, in partnership with the Foundation, has sponsored the Nashville Public Literary Award. This is our 9th year to bring an author of national and this year international stature. We are so thrilled to bring distinguished authors here who contribute to the world of books and reading. And to get us going a little further this morning, I want to introduce to you the chair of our Library Board of Trustees and an advocate, a tireless advocate for reading and learning in Nashville and in the library world nationally. Keith Simmons, will you come on up?
Well, it is my great privilege and honor to welcome you to the public lecture of our annual literary award. We're excited that we're going to be able to honor and hear from Margaret Atwood today. As Terry said, it's quite a pleasure to get to know Ms. Atwood and learn more about her writing. In honor of Mrs. Atwood being with us, the Mayor's Office, the Nashville Public Library Foundation, and the library has been sponsoring for the last month or so a citywide read called Nashville Reads. And that effort has been centered around The Handmaid's Tale, Ms. Atwood's great novel. And as most of you know in this room, book clubs all over the city have been discussing and reading A Handmaid's Tale, The Handmaid's Tale, sorry. And we've had discussions facilitated by Parnassus Books, Vanderbilt University, and Mayor Dean. And let me say, Mayor Dean is a great, great supporter of this, and it's wonderful to have a mayor who is as well-read and who loves reading as much as Mayor Dean does. He has been fabulous with all of the authors that we've had over the years, and I just think we should. Great. In connection with all this, we've sponsored 2 creative writing competitions among high school young people in our city. One is a 6-word story contest. 6 words. Now, social media, people, social media, that's what it's all about. So you got to be able to tell a story in 6 words. The winner of that competition, previously announced, is Amanda Tucker. We have also in the past had writing competitions for poetry, essays, depending upon who our literary award honoree was for that year. This year it is a very short story writing competition. a short story competition composed of 5 to 10 sentences to tell a story. How many of us could do that? But we have 4 wonderful high school students from Nashville with us today who did that wonderfully, and their work product will be distributed to you, or perhaps it already has been in the course of the morning. So let me recognize our 4 finalists. We had 50, in the neighborhood of 50 submissions of short stories from area high schools, and here are our finalists. And I'll ask, as I call your name wherever you are, there, I'll ask you to stand and be recognized. From University School of Nashville, Alexandra Yu. Also from University School, Lena Friedman. From the Nashville School of the Arts, Isaac Gish. And the final finalist and the winner of our writing competition actually couldn't be with us this morning because she had to take the ACT test. We have to do what we have to do, you know. Her name is Ann Manning, and she is a senior at Hillsborough High School. So let's give one more round of applause for all of these wonderful young writers. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our library director. This is his first year for doing the Literary Award Gala. We're thrilled to have Kent Oliver join us from Stark County Library in Canton, Ohio. Kent is a leader in in his profession and in our library world nationally, and we are thrilled and very fortunate to have attracted Kent and his wife Diane to our city. So I will turn it over to Kent to introduce Ms. Atwood.
Not bad. You come from Canton, Ohio, and a few months later you're introducing Margaret Atwood. But seriously, thank you for being with us this morning. It's such a pleasure to be in a community in a city that enjoys reading and values its libraries so highly. So it is a thrill to be here. Margaret Atwood was born in 1939 in Ottawa, and she grew up in northern Ontario, Quebec, and Toronto. She received her undergraduate degree from Victoria College at the University of Toronto and her master's degree at Radcliffe College. She is the author of more than 50 volumes of poetry, children's literature, fiction, and nonfiction. Think about that, 50. She is best known for some of her novels that include The Edible Woman, The Handmaid's Tale, and The Blind Assassin, which won the prestigious Booker Prize in 2000. And her most recent novel is Year of the Flood. This next thing I think is important to me, particularly in that in 2011, Atwood emerged as the crusader against cuts to public libraries, using Twitter to weigh in on the budget debate in Toronto. She tweeted a link to a petition against the closing of the public library branches and has said that even as technology changes and how we read, the libraries remain vital. I'd really like to thank Ms. Atwood for her support of libraries, whether it's in Toronto or the United States, and it's so critical. We were sitting backstage before we came out, and I shared that I had a story about her that I'd heard from a colleague in Ohio. And I told her the story, and she said it's absolutely false. And, and the story was that there was an English class, and they turned in papers, and the teacher came in and threw the papers down on the table and said, these papers are terrible, you all did terribly, I just wish you could all write like Margaret. She said the truth is that as an 11th grader, she was told that she would never develop into anything. And I think we all know now that that's different. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Margaret Atwood.
Well, that's lovely, and I am deeply honored to be receiving this award, and I'm very happy to be in Nashville, which is having a very perky moment in its history right now. It seems to be booming, and everybody's filled with all sorts of plans. And I used to listen to the Grand Ole Opry as a child in the 40s. I would glue myself onto the radio. We didn't have television yet. And there were no pantyhose. In the olden days, I used to glue myself onto the radio and listen to the Grand Ole Opry because those songs had stories. So I liked them better than the songs that didn't have stories. And I did threaten to begin this because they fatally told me that I could do whatever I wanted. By singing you a little country and western. Is anybody up for that? I've got tears in my ears from lying on my back in my bed while I cry over you. And I had the thrill of going to the Grand Ole Opry in the Ryman the last time I was here. It was full of people from Calgary. But it was quite wonderful to see that place that I had heard as a child, and it's still there. In fact, I think some of the very same people are still there. And it's all good. So I am here, however, to talk about the Handmaid's Tale and novel writing and those kinds of things, another form of narrative art, like country and western. And narrative is something that is built into us as human beings. It's part of our package. You can look at kids under the age of 4, and everything that they do naturally that you don't have to teach them is part of our it comes with package. And they start understanding stories around the age of 1. It's really very early. So tell your kids stories, read to kids. Young kids are really into stories of all kinds, including puppet shows, and I understand that you've got a very active puppet facility here. I have a background in puppetry myself. It was one of the things I did in high school. I did a lot of pretty strange things in high school. But I did run a puppet show, and I performed for me and my partner performed for kids around the age of 5 or 6, which is when they really like stories about cannibalism. So, Little Red Riding Hood, 3 Little Pigs, Hansel and Gretel, those stories. You know, here comes the cannibalism, but they get away. We like those. So, over to The Handmaid's Tale, a somewhat more serious subject. We'll first begin by telling you where I was when I started writing it and how all that came about. I started writing it in West Berlin in 1984. How could I have been so corny as to start a dystopian novel in 1984, but I couldn't help myself. I just had to do it. Right before that, I had been living in England, in North Norfolk, which happens to be the #1 bird watching spot in England. Everything gets blown across from Russia, essentially, and lands in the salt marshes there, and that's why we picked that spot. We had decided to go out of our country for a year in order to write. So I was there. We were living in I don't make this stuff up. We were living in a haunted rectory, which is just the kind of place you would wish to live in if you were living in North Norfolk. And it had been a nunnery in the 14th century, and it was said to be haunted by nuns. They were in the parlor. I never saw them. In fact, I never saw anybody, but other people did. And it was said to be haunted by nuns in the parlor, a jolly cavalier in the dining room, and a headless woman in the kitchen. About the only person who had seen the headless woman, said the rector, was an American, and he didn't trust her. He said, you know, they're always coming over looking for their roots. So he didn't trust about the headless woman, but one day there actually was a jolly cavalier in the dining room. He had wandered over from the pub next door. He didn't know where he was. But anyway, I was writing a different novel in England, and it didn't work out. It really didn't work out. I had to throw it out. So right after that, we went to Berlin, West Berlin. It was still the wall around it. It was still the East German Air Force flying over every Sunday and making sonic booms, just so we would know it was Checkpoint Charlie and the spy that came in from the cold, and all of that kind of apparatus was still there. So it was a bit ominous, you know, it was a bit ominous. I had started trying to write The Handmaid's Tale somewhat earlier, and I had abandoned it because I thought it was too crazy. But it's always the crazy ones you have to write, finally. So this is before computers. I went off to a rental store, and I rented a honking huge typewriter with a German keyboard. So The Handmaid's Tale was written with a German keyboard. Luckily, I can't type. So it's actually much easier for people who can't type to adjust their keyboards, because they have to look anyway. So there I was. The reason I can't type goes back to high school, where I wrongly took home economics instead of typing. And the reason I didn't take typing was that those people scared me. They had very thin eyebrows, and they smoked in the washroom, and I was 12, you know. They skipped people in those days, so. And they wore their boyfriends' leather jackets with the athletic letter and things like that. So they were very scary. So I took home ec instead, and I can set in your zipper, no problem. But I cannot type. So there I was, pecking away at The Handmaid's Tale in West Germany. And I thought it was a pretty good place to start, because East Germany, which has a Canadian I could visit, the West Germans couldn't, but I could go there, and it was sewed up tighter than anything. People were scared to talk to you. The chocolate was horrible. And we also at that time visited Czechoslovakia, and we visited Poland in 1984. So it was a flavor, in addition to everything I had read about totalitarianisms. And that is the first point I would make about The Handmaid's Tale. You were probably often told that it's a, quote, a feminist dystopia. Actually, it is a pure and simple dystopia told from a female point of view, because the men in it are not having a tippity-top time either, unless they're in the upper echelons. And that is what is true of totalitarianisms. There is an elite at the top. They're always shaped like pyramids. The men and the women at the top have a better time than the men and the women at the bottom. That's kind of true of every society, but in one structured like that, it's even more true. And why was I interested in totalitarianisms? Born in 1939, grew up in the war, read everything that I could get about Nazi Germany, and then the USSR, and eventually other ones like China and Cambodia. So scary stuff. Do not go for any system that means that the individual loses control. And I would include in that theocracies. I would include combinations of government and corporations in which the two are inseparable. Anything that means you have no recourse, that something bad happens to you, you have no recourse. So balance of powers, very necessary. Anyway, in The Handmaid's Tale, which is the answer to if America were going to establish a totalitarianism, what kind would it be? It's the answer to that question. So it would be much more like this kind than it would be like, say, East Germany. East Germany, power to the people, except just incidentally, not you. United States, God loves you, just incidentally, not you. So like that. You'd get much more support in this country for putting in something like a theocracy than you would for getting in something like communism. So, but any form, they're all the same once you get the thing thoroughly established. So communism, fascism, we usually think of them as being on a line, you know, one over here, but it's actually a circle, because if you extend them far enough and they meet, and the kind of structure, forget what it calls itself, the kind of structure you get is the same. So Stalin, Hitler, they were both awful. Big news. I told you first. So, building The Handmaid's Tale. One of my rules for it was that I would not put into it anything that human beings had not done at some time in some place. So every single detail, including the group hangings, including the color coding by clothing outfit, we've done it all. And that means that we could do it again. And I am not one of those people who ever says it can't happen here, because anything can happen anywhere given the conditions for it. It was extremely creepy. They made an opera of The Handmaid's Tale. It launched in Denmark in the year 2000. I was there. It's actually pretty good. But they started it with a film clip of the social chaos things that had caused a totalitarianism to be attractive. And one of them showed the Twin Towers blowing up before it happened. When they did that opera again, after it happened, they had to take out that bit because what you were seeing in the film clip was supposed to be in the future. So these are the kinds of things that actually make my blood run cold. And I was talking to my agent recently, who has been my agent for a long time, and she reminded me that I was sitting in her living room in Santa Monica, California, when I was writing this book, and I said to her, "The book I am writing scares me, but I have to keep writing it." I had forgotten that I said that, but I did. So I wrote quite a bit of it there. We then were back in Canada, and I continued writing it. And then we were in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I was the MFA chair. So I finished the book in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Think of those bookends: West Berlin, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's very, very different. But each one had some weird things about it. In Tuscaloosa, Alabama, they said, "Don't ride a bicycle here. They'll think you're a communist and run you off the road." Which was probably true. So it's always interesting to actually be in places and experience them from the inside. Now, the book itself, as you know, and I think it's very courageous of your mayor to have chosen this book. It's not an easy read. It doesn't have a hippity-hoppity-happy ending. It has a pretty open ending. And it's not, and it is controversial in some circles. Though I would say to all of those who say, is this against Christianity? I would say, what kind of Christianity do you mean? The person in the book, the narrator, actually does her version of the Lord's Prayer. So the thing about religion, and I said this to Mr. Richard Dawkins, who had been rather vociferous in his, in his demands that we all give up religion. I said, don't you think it's part of the human package? Because it's so widespread, it would have to be something that we're adapted for, it comes with. And I thought he was going to give me a fight. He said, of course. Which one I did not say to him, then why do you keep telling people that they can't have it? So it's not a question of whether or not people have a religion. It is a question of what kind of religion they have. And even if they say they don't have one, I would look and see, what is it that you are worshiping? Is it the stock market? Because that too can have a religious dimension. There's this invisible thing that works in mysterious ways. You have faith in it. Sometimes it does bad things to you, but that's just testing you. It's testing your faith in market forces. So there is, everybody's got one. It's just a question of what it is. And the people who are running the country in this book have done the thing which regimes so often do. They claim to know. They claim to know what God wants. Now, in my study of Christianity, that happens to be a heresy. You cannot know what God wants. You can't do it. So everybody who tells you that they do know, I would give them the fisheye. I would look askance upon them, even if they tell you that God wants you to be raped. I would not. I'm saying that's probably kind of a presumption on your part to know what God knows. I'm going to read to you the bit that I wrote first, and it is often true when I'm writing books that I write a bit first and then that moves somewhere else in the book. But this is the part I wrote first. I set the whole novel in Cambridge, Massachusetts. All of the buildings are real. All of the structures are real, and Harvard was at first deeply irritated. And the movie was not filmed at Harvard, it was filmed at Duke. And the Handmaids, people playing the Handmaids are actually members of the Duke drama and dance classes. But the funny story about the filming is that we were doing the hanging scene. And people were pulling on the feet of this girl and whatnot, and there she was. And the door of the chapel opened, and out came a wedding rehearsal party. They were quite offended. It's our wedding. What are you doing hanging someone right now? Anyway, they were irritated at first, but they've come round. They've come round. Yes, I did put the Secret Service in the Widener Library, which is another little library hook-in for you. So this part is the wall, and there is this brick wall around Harvard Yard. And going way back in history, hanging people on walls is a motif. It's now come back in Mexico. The drug lords are hanging people up in public, dead people, and they're always used as warnings. You know, dead people hanging, this could happen to you. So that's what those kinds of displays are about. The wall is hundreds of years old too, or over 100 at least. Like the sidewalks, it's red brick and must once have been plain but handsome. Now the gates have sentries, and there are ugly new floodlights mounted on metal posts above it, and barbed wire along the bottom, and broken glass set in concrete along the top. No one goes through those gates willingly. The precautions are for those trying to get out. Though to make it even as far as the wall from the inside past the electronic alarm system would be next to impossible. Beside the main gateway, there are 6 more bodies hanging by the necks, their hands tied in front of them, their heads in white bags, tipped sideways onto their shoulders. There must have been a men's salvaging early this morning. I didn't hear the bells. Perhaps I've become used to them. We stop together as if on signal and stand and look at the bodies. It doesn't matter if we look. We're supposed to look. This is what they're there for, hanging on the wall. Sometimes they'll be there for days until there's a new batch, so as many people as possible will have the chance to see them. What they are hanging from is hooks. The hooks have been set into the brickwork of the wall for this purpose. Not all of them are occupied. The hooks look like appliances for the armless, or steel question marks upside down and sideways. It's the bags over the heads that are the worst, worse than the faces themselves would be. It makes the men look like dolls on which the faces have not yet been painted, like scarecrows, which in a way is what they are, since they are meant to scare. Or as if their heads are sacks, stuffed with some undifferentiated material like flour or dough. It's the obvious heaviness of the heads, their vacancy, the way gravity pulls them down and there's no life anymore to hold them up. The heads are zeros. Though if you look and look, as we are doing, you can see the outlines of the features under the white cloth like gray shadows. The heads are the heads of snowmen with the coal eyes and the carrot noses fallen out. The heads are melting. But on one bag there's blood, which is seeped through the white cloth where the mouth must have been. It makes another mouth, a small red one, like the mouths painted with thick brushes by kindergarten children. A child's idea of a smile. This smile of blood is what fixes the attention finally. These are not snowmen, after all. So I did promise that I would conclude this event by doing a bit from the year of the flood, which is another future world, more recent one. And in the year of the flood, there's a much more benevolent religion, which is the God's gardeners, who are completely vegetarian, unless you get really, really hungry. And they do gardening on rooftops, in slums, and they have a leader whose name is Adam 1. And the other people that are high up in this organization are the Adams and Eves, each one of which is in charge of a different area of life. And they are quite benevolent and pacifist, and they take in one of the narrators, actually both of the narrators in the story are inside the God's gardeners at the beginning of the gardener's existence. And they have a lot of festivals. They are attempting to combine science, religion, and scripture. So they have a number of different festivals, and they have their own saints. For instance, St. Rachel Carson, of all birds. And they have St. Robert Burns for interspecies communication with mice. And I actually took the saints from all around the world and all of the historical periods that I could find. So some of them would be well known, such as St. Francis, and others would be pretty obscure. But you can find them all where I did, on the internet. And I'm writing part 3 of this series, Oryx and Crake, Year of the Flood, and now part 3, and I'm putting in some new saints. I missed Jane Goodall the first time around, but she's in there now. She's in there now. So one of their festivals is a children's festival, and it is the Festival of Underground Life. So all of the little decorations and things they make, they're big recyclers. So they make little molds out of hair combs and stuffed pantyhose and things like that they have gotten off rubbish dumps. So all of these things are fairly small because everything that lives under the ground is pretty small. but it's also very vital to our existence, because without it we would in fact be living on an untilled, unporous desert. So Adam 1 gives a sermon about the moles, and then, as is always after the sermons, they sing one of their hymns. And this is a children's hymn called "We Praise the Tiny Perfect Moles." All of the hymns were written to standard hymn tunes, but then my friend Orville got into it, a musician and composer, and he did music for all of them, which you'll find in the audiobook, and it's also up online. When we launched the book, we did a series of dramatic and musical events. So these songs were sung by everything from a 3-person trio to a full shout-out a cappella choir of 35 people, and everything in between. Some of them great, some of them so bad. I thought we were going to get kicked off the stage, but it all worked out. It's not like doing Hamlet. People didn't know what to expect, so they couldn't say it was a good year of the flood or it was a bad year of the flood, because there was no previous experience. We did it in Japan, actually, with Japanese actors in Japanese. We're about to do it in Australia. So this is the only one I can sing. We praise the tiny, perfect moles that garden underground. Boom, boom. The ant, the worm, the nematode, wherever they are found. Boom, boom. They live their whole lives in the dark, unseen by human sight. The earth is like the air to them. Their day is like our night. They turn the soil and till it. They make the plants to thrive. The earth would be a desert if they were not alive. Boop, 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 boop. The little carrion beetles that seek unlikely places return our husks to elements and tidy up our spaces. And so for God's small creatures beneath the field and wood, let us today give joyful thanks, for God has found them good. Let us today give joyful thanks, for God has found them good. So now we get to have a question and answer, and there is a microphone here and a microphone there, but it's also a small room, so if you don't want to make your way through all of those people, just wave your hand around. I'll repeat your question. Supposing you have any questions. Maybe you have no questions. No, there's a question. Okay, the question was, when I wrote it in 1984, and it was published in 85, it seems now to be incredibly prescient. Did I think of it as prescient then, and do I think of it as prescient now? Okay, so it was published, first of all, in 3 different countries, and the reaction to it in those countries was different. In England, they thought jolly good yarn. And the reason they thought jolly good yarn was that they did all of this in the 17th century. They had Oliver Cromwell, they broke all the stained glass windows, they did that kind of thing. They shut down the theaters. So the sort of clamps went on at that time, and they didn't, so they did it then. And they know the dangers of religious civil wars, which any kind of civil war is horrible, but religious civil wars are even worse. And Europe had been doing that to itself for some centuries, so not something they had planned for their future. And I doubt that it is in the future of England. In Canada, they said, as Canadians nervously always say, they said, can it happen here? Less likely to happen there. I'm sometimes asked, why didn't you said it in Canada? Well, Canada is a country that has roughly a quarter French-speaking people and a lot of other groups in it. And I don't think you could get the momentum for one group to achieve the 33.3% that's necessary for a totalitarian takeover. The United States, on the other hand, they didn't say jolly good yarn, and they didn't say, can it happen here? They said, how long have we got? All except for Mary McCarthy, who said, no, it's not going to happen, but credit cards worry me. That's what she said. She's right to be worried by credit cards. I'm worried by them myself. Don't ever do away with cash money, because things that seem like a big convenience, and they are also things that can be used to trace you and quite quickly shut down your credit, like with the push of a button. So not cash money, don't do away with it, please, I beg you. So at that time, some of the stuff feeding into The Handmaid's Tale were opinions that were already being voiced by certain people in the United States, which does have a foundational background of a 17th century Puritan theocracy. That's in there. It's in the political DNA, if you like. It has an overlay of 18th century religious toleration, founding fathers, okay to put God on the money, but not a specific one. So you'll notice in The Handmaid's Tale that the group that has taken over is busily obliterating all of the competing religions as the Bolsheviks quickly eliminated the Mensheviks. So you want to get rid of your nearest competitors. And therefore the Baptists are being hunted down in The Handmaid's Tale. They're too liberal for this bunch. Sorry. So was it prescient? I don't like my books to be prescient, and it really, I write them in the hopes that I'll be wrong. And I was not as wrong as I hoped that I would be. What is one of the features of totalitarianisms? They all try to control women and reproduction. Every single one of them, no matter what they call themselves, no matter which way it is, you have to have lots of babies, you can't have any babies. Whatever it is, they're all stating their claim, your body is theirs. So it's just a feature. It's a feature of totalitarianisms. You don't want to have one, I don't think. So it's like that. Another question? Okay, is there an evolutionary foundation for reading? Is that the question? No. Okay, it's not writing and reading that's part of it. It's storytelling. Okay, the ability to tell a story. And if you haven't encountered that yet, you will shortly, because there's a lot of people working on it. And the evolutionary thinking behind it is that those with that ability in the Pleistocene would have had an edge on those without it. And when you think about it, you can see why that would be true. I can tell you a story about Uncle Charlie getting eaten by an alligator right over there. And therefore, don't go swimming there. So all of those who could tell their children that and pass on knowledge. So by storytelling, I don't mean novel writing. I mean the ability to narrate one event followed by another event followed by another event. The latest just in, you can find it in New Scientist online, is that they are now proposing that the episodic memory function, the ability to remember events, didn't evolve so that we could remember the past. It evolved so that we could have a handle on the future. In other words, Uncle Charlie got eaten by an alligator, don't go swimming there. Don't have an eating event by an alligator in your future, like that. or conversely, and you do find this, and we travel up north quite a bit and hear tales from Inuit elders, hunting ability. Okay, here is how you go about catching the gazelle. So you don't have to go out every time and start from scratch. You're drawing on the knowledge of your tribe and group that's being passed on to you as a young person from people older than yourself who have got it from people older than them. So that's what I mean by narrative. Rover the dog has certain kinds of episodic memory that he uses to predict the future. He remembers that you usually come home at 6 o'clock and give him a dog food thing, and therefore he's eagerly awaiting you at 6 o'clock because he anticipates that you're going to do that today as well. But he doesn't have the grammar that would allow Rover the dog to ever ask the question, where did dogs come from in the first place? Or what will happen to me personally, Rover, when I die? You know, he doesn't go far back into the past and far forward into the future, and he never does end of the world scenarios. So like that, but we do, because we have those kinds of grammars. Is that any help? Okay. Okay, what do I consider the impact of, quotes, technology today? By technology today, people are no longer referring to the gramophone or automobiles. This word technology has morphed into something meaning computers and online stuff. Is that what we're talking about? So how have computers and online stuff impacted writing and story sharing? There's a number of spin-offs, but this is very much in flux right now. And people are thinking a lot about it. In fact, not a conference passes, but you've got to have a big panel on it. And everybody goes, moo. And it changes every time, because every time they have the panel, something else has happened, right? But in short form, speed and ubiquity for small narrative bites. Long form, people split into 3 groups. Number 1, I wouldn't read online if you held a gun to my head. Number 3 over here, you are a troglodyte and live in a cave unless you tear up all your paper books and do nothing but read online. And most people are in the middle and they say we want both. We want online, we want electronic forms for travel and immediacy. If we really like something or if it's really long, we want to read in paper books because there is in fact a neurological difference. It's kind of hard, and a lot of people have tried and found this, it's kind of hard to read War and Peace in electronic form, or anything else that's quite long and that contains information that you really have to keep tabs on. So that has been the result of my personal researches into the subject. But as for Twitter, and I try all of these things to see if they work for me or if I like them and things, so I try them, and I like some of them and I don't like others. I can see the beauty of them and what other people might wish to have them for. So Pinterest, for instance, seems to be used mostly for people sharing pictures of furniture. I think you can put book covers up on it, but that's not going to be the main function of that. Facebook, I have never really got a grasp on. I have a Facebook page that's run pretty much by my publishers, although it was generated by Facebook itself, and the only reason I knew about it was that my Twitter followers said, hey, you've got a Facebook page. And I said, no, I don't. And they said, yes, you do. So then you have to take it over. Otherwise, other people are running your Facebook page. You don't know what's going to happen. Twitter, I like. It's short. Any followers in the room? Hello, Twitter followers. So if you've been doing it from the beginning, you'll know that this has been an experiment, and I've made a lot of typos. But luckily, my Twitter followers are pretty sharp, and if I make a typo and ask them what this strange new word means, I'll get 100 answers, and they're all pretty funny. So they are anybody's followers are a self-selecting group, and they're interested in a wide range of things, but they're not much interested in just yelling and saying rude words. So I'm fond of my Twitter followers. And if I put somebody's book out there, they will go, and if I put the URL, they will go and look at that book by somebody else, because the other thing about social media is that it is social. So it is for sharing, it is for interacting, it is not for big wads of self-advertisement. People get onto that pretty quickly. So I think of it as having your own little radio station in which you can more or less have people on your show. You can have people on your show. I just put Ann Patchett on my show. And you can sort of broadcast that way to your followers, and they'll be interested in some of the stuff you have on and not in other stuff, but it doesn't matter because I'm the same about theirs. Okay, when we die, our stories die. Not always. First of all, if you have told it and passed it on, and that's what narration and writing are partly for. If you have told it and passed it on, or if somebody else has heard your story and tells it and passes it on. So writing and oral forms act differently, but they're both forms of story transmission. And I actually don't know of a single person in my own experience, and this category of people who have died that I have known is getting unfortunately larger, but I don't know of a single one in which when they have died, everything about them dies. Because people continue to remember them and tell stories about them. And if you have the good old-fashioned sort of funeral plus a wake, you know what happens at those. People sit around and tell stories about that person. And if you happen to be present in that group, you will then tell those stories to somebody else at some time. But if you have relatives and kids and a story of your life, write it down, because they may not seem interested in it right now, but they will be later. And I've seen this many times, that somebody says, well, I didn't ask him about so-and-so. I always wanted to know the story of so-and-so. I didn't ask. And now I don't know. So if there is something, write it down, put it somewhere. Somebody later will find it. And that's one of the things I like about the written word. It is a voice speaking from the past, always. If you want to read about the difference between spoken and oral forms, it's in a book that I wrote called Negotiating with the Dead. And it's about writing. What is this writing? How does it operate? How is it different from the other arts? What do people think when they're doing it? So, short form, writing on a page is like a musical score. When nobody's playing that music, it just sits there. It's an inert thing. Comes to life again when somebody plays the music. Similarly, a piece of writing, it lies there on the page, it's black marks on a piece of paper, it's doing nothing until somebody reads it. And that reading is like the playing of a musical score. So the reader is like the violinist, they're playing the piece. It's the same score, but each reading of it, each playing of it is individual. So when you're reading, you are the musician of the book. And that is a good place for us to end. Thank you.